Hi everyone, my name is Tamer. I'm a first-year MBA student at MIT Sloan, and it's my pleasure to introduce Professor Peter Fadi. He's the Director of Learning Systems Design and Technology Graduate Program at Southern Illinois University. Please.
I've got the mic here, yeah, I'll use that. Yeah, that's been my gig for the last 15 years. Before that, for 13 years, I was athletic video coordinator at Purdue University, working on my degree one piece at a time. And in that time frame, this was primarily working with football coaches and game analysis, not broadcast type video, but strictly game analysis, shooting games, practices, breaking them down for coaches to study tendencies. And in that time period, I saw a number of technology changes. In fact, the first year that I was in that job, 1990, was the last year that the Big Ten used film, 16-millimeter film for official game exchange in the conference. By the next year, we were on to VHS video. Ultimately, it was Betacam video. And then in the mid-90s, something that really was a game changer. These others were iterative improvements. But when we brought in digital video, which came in from the broadcast side, Avid Technologies, an offshoot of that, became Avid Sports, and they brought nonlinear video, and that meant that coaches could now do their own sort by data. We'd set it all up for them. Data sort with video follow. What a great way to study, and that's still the way they do it. That was a game changer. So the thing today is that we're looking at something that looks like maybe it's a game changer. But we're not sure. So we're doing a little bit of a role play, as advertised in the write-up, putting you in the role of being an MLB or NFL general manager or a Power 5 athletic director, and your head coach has just come to you and say, you've got to have this. This is a game changer, competitive advantage to be gained or lost if we don't jump in on virtual reality. And the difference maker is this guy right here, the Oculus. So they set up a demo. You put on the Oculus Rift head-mounted display, and wow! It's just like you're there. It's just like you're standing next to the starting quarterback in a 7-on-7 drill. That's what the video is. Your mind starts racing. This could be the team taking the field. Wouldn't that be great for recruiting? I mean, you're right there with the team. Think about what it could mean for some of your alumni to say, hey, you can be in Drew Brees' eyes playing in there. That was also the period where Joe Tiller brought basketball on grass to the Big Ten, and Brees was our quarterback for the early 2000s. So your mind is racing with that. The thing is, how much of that is promise? You know, somewhere over the horizon, some kind of blue sky, because that's where you go right away. But now we're right of wow. In law enforcement, they talk about left of bang, moments before the shot. Now we're right of wow. Now what do we do with this? Now we have to really look at this as a coaching and learning tool. Put those other things aside. Put the game day experience, the fan experience. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the coaching implications of VR, virtual reality, and it really grabbed in the NFL. In the last season, in less than a year, 9 teams, by my count, could be more because they're kind of secretive about it, by my count, bought in VR systems. And when I say bought in, I mean 150,000 a year and over. We're not talking about a cheap buy-in there at all. So if you're looking at your return on investment, you're looking at your cost benefit on that, you better be seeing some pretty sizable benefits to balance that. Here's exactly what we get. We get a set of about 6 GoPro cameras in an array that capture the 360. Now, those individual videos still need to be stitched together into the 360 virtual reality for that. Some people assume that we are taking an egocentric view, that you're going into the eyes of the quarterback. But as you can see, the array doesn't have a helmet on. your view, which is where the camera is next to the quarterback. So you're standing right next to the quarterback. That's kind of cool. In fact, one of the early adopters of it, the Arizona Cardinals, talking to their video guy, because that's one of the things that you guys, as GMs, they sometimes don't think of talking to the video guys, but they should. And they say Carson Palmer really likes to use this, and his favorite thing is to stand next to himself. Looking at himself, he can check his footwork. You know, he can check to see where he was. Was he giving anything away with his helmet movement or his shoulder movements before then? That's primarily what he does. He's self-coaching. Somebody who's that veteran, he's a self-coach in there. So that's a pretty sizable gain from him. Now the number 2 and the number 3 quarterback can also stand there and look right next to, shoulder to shoulder, to Carson Palmer, who's getting all the reps, of course, against the ones. And the 3 especially is off on scout team. So there's sizable advantages. This is what then the football player thinks of that. This is
the real live environment is incredible. You're getting that point of view from the spot where you're going to stand on the field, and you can see everything where everyone's lined up and the indicators of what they're going to show and what kind of defense they're going to have. Actually feel like
note the tether. All right, so there you see both the promise and the relatively limited actual delivery of what you get. It's a matter of what you want out of that. And so, yeah, you can look left to right. That's the power of that. You are on a practice field. But back when we were in blue sky, you were immediately thinking to, oh, this is how they'll prepare for their next opponent. Not really. You might prepare during, this is what they call a 7-on-7 drill, because they won't let the video guys put this out there during a full team drill because the array might get hit. You might hurt the camera, or more importantly, at least at the NFL level, you might hurt a player. What we really want to understand as we try to really see what this is first of all, to kind of put out of our mind that this is something completely new. We've been looking at VR and football in particular for a long time. I visited the University of Michigan's quarterback simulator cave, which is a 3-sided, so it's the size of this thing here with rear projection on there. And a guy is able to sit in there, look left, look right, not with the goggles, but also not with the photorealistic display. It's animated display. So this is the thing that's crossing over right now. We see the animated display versus the video, which is interpreted as reality. Again, this is not unprecedented. 3D MVP was being developed by in conjunction with the Ravens when Coach Billick was there. I talked to their video guy. When Billick left, this went in the closet. So when we're dealing with these types of technologies, sometimes very expensive, sometimes that distance from box to closet, from wow to closet, isn't very far. That's what we want to look at. The other picture is using this Gridiron Technologies system that was really designed to let somebody play an EA Sports type game, but where you had your offense and the opponent's defense plugged into it. So it was like a realistic one there. And it sold into a few college programs, not too many pros. The founder had a nice exit, and they kind of went on from there. And these are nice products. There's nothing wrong with them. They weren't somehow right for the opportunity. And the main thing is that they didn't fit. It's nothing to do with the fidelity of the VR, one of these other questions. It's how does this fit within a football game week preparation schedule? Doesn't have a lot of time in it. It's pretty much maxed out. Somebody asked Coach Tiller one time, well, what are you doing before a big game with Notre Dame, extra for Notre Dame? He said, if I could do it extra for Notre Dame, I'd do it extra for East Tennessee. You do what you do in week, and there's not a lot of room to fit into that. So there's a number of things we need to see how they can fit in if you're going to make a good decision as that GM about whether you're going to bring in this technology. Are you going to hold and wait? Are you going to get now, try and get an advantage? Where are you going to place yourself on that? Well, one of these initial questions is the notion of training versus entertaining. We really want to understand that these are different things. VR for entertaining is here. You know, that's a big deal. You can go Consumer Electronics Show or wherever. You know, that's super. And the EA Sports, the Madden football is to the level now where there's a very realistic play. And in fact, Teddy Bridgewater, when he was at Louisville, here pictured as a player with the Vikings, is reputed to have used the practice mode of EA Sports. So of Madden football, we'd have to have some good Madden players to know if they ever tried to do that. But with enough work, you could actually set up your offense and defense the same way that they did in that Gridiron simulator. Now they've got the 3D 360 video at the Vikings. The Vikings guy said that as the season went on, it got used less and less. The wow kind of wore off. That's not, again, a criticism, but it means, you know, where does it fit within that process? Now, the biggest player in the coach analysis field is this Exos, and they had a system, and again, this goes back, this was live from probably about 2008 to 2011, but we're talking about a $250,000 product. Now, here's the real difference maker. He is moving, he's acting, he's moving within that, and that's the real thing there. This is true VR. We could actually make an argument, if you're looking at it academically, that what we're talking about with the 360 isn't really true VR because you don't move and have that reflected in the display. It's a read-only. That one that we just saw, you saw the quarterback, he's up there, he's throwing a pass, he's in the game. Much more compelling, but is it lead to better learning? That's what we need to know, because we're not looking at entertaining, we're looking at training. We're not looking at fan experience, we're looking at players who already have the skills to throw the ball around the field. Sometimes we're looking at learning in a more basic kind of way. This is something that's intended really for high school quarterbacks. You know, how do we turn schemes into schema? You know, we've got football schemes, your alignments, and by schema, I mean your model, your mental model of the game, your geography of the game, your game sense. Now, that's what we hope that we're really getting to. And actually, I've got some colleagues who are going up tomorrow to Giant Stadium, and they've got a high school combine up there, and they're going to be giving them this test. So this is what we'd call declarative knowledge. You know, just basic formation, personnel group, that sort of thing. Just knowledge. But we also want to do something win-loss. And so this is procedural or applied knowledge. Your task here is to say, okay, boom, from the defensive perspective, they gained 4 yards or not. So maybe you could have named those formations. You could have named what the offensive formation was and the defensive formation. Maybe you can get all 20 of these who wins that play without getting the others. We don't know. That's why it's a good experiment, because we don't know how it's going to come out yet. These are the things we need to know. We need to know what's the relation between that kind of declarative knowledge, that book knowledge, and that field knowledge. And then we have a QB test too, which uses a very inexpensive VR tool, Go Army Edge. And here, the quarterback doesn't have control. He doesn't even have the left to right control. The producer has already given that to him, but he's given him a chance to look left and right, scan the formations, and make his decision where he's going to deliver the ball. Again, that's a test mode. The one thing about football, ahead of some other sports, and we'll talk about other sports, this is not all about football, but it's mostly about football because that's where it's blowing up right now. And football has the budgets to jump in for something like this. A lot of other sports don't. Some sports blink at $250,000. Big-time football, college and NFL, doesn't even swallow hard. That still doesn't mean that you don't want to, as the GM, be making good return on investment decisions. The one thing that football really gives us is the end zone view, which we've had for a very long time. Partly because football is a play. Coaches see, and you'll see it on TV sometimes, the 22 in, they see everybody. And so even now, however many 17 cameras on the Super Bowl, the coaches will say they can see everything that they need to see for analysis from these two shots. First, a sideline view of the play, and then the end zone view of the play that focuses on the line. I had a guy come over. He was the skill acquisition specialist, PhD certified, from an Australian Football League team. He came and visit. His son was punting at Eastern Kentucky. Now he's punting for the Steelers. And he looked over all the technology, and we gave him the whole dog and pony. And what he took home, he said, "This is my takeaway, is the end zone video." He went back to the Bombers, and they started shooting end zone video. Before, they just used sideline video. Do you know how much we're asking somebody, what the perceptual cognitive load is of taking a sideline view like that and turning it around to what it looks like for you? Now, how far do we need to go? Do we need to go inside the helmet, or does it what now familiar to all of us as the Skycam? Yeah, I love Skycam. Skycam's the greatest, and it looks an awful lot like that EA Sports. My wife calls it the video game cam. Well, now you're a little bit lower than that end zone one, just a little bit lower. You couldn't see the safeties on that. Now you can. Is this good film for instructing a quarterback off of, or a quarterback preparing for the next opponent? I think it is. But what people would say is, okay, that's nice for practice. Or they shoot that in games for ESPN, but they don't have it available in practice. Well, I was just down at the Combine last week in Indianapolis, and they've got some new products, including something that lets you shoot your own version of Skycam in practice. So it's kind of interesting that the VR, the 360 video has cut through like a speedboat cutting through the bay out here, and left a wake in it, and all of a sudden people are much more aware than they used to be of camera angles. What does a guy really need to see in order to process that in the way that you want to? That's also meant the use of drones. And people kind of laugh anytime drones comes up, but as a video coordinator, I used to either be on a 30-foot to 40-foot lift like that, or send students. I was responsible up for it. And I don't know how many of you know of the accident at Notre Dame, but a couple of years ago, one of these things went over. So we can start replacing that with a drone, and they can give the ultimate football coach's analysis shot, which is straight overhead and paint X's nose on their helmets. That's what the coaches want to see. But that's not what's best for player training. That's what we're really crossing over here, the idea of what's good for analysis versus what's good for training. So at the Combine there, here's some companies then who are coming in to that wake, filling in that wake with some very savvy video products. Here you'd go ahead and shoot with the GoPro, but you're not using the whole array. You're not 360, you're just 180. Not that much football actually happens behind you that you can do anything about. So this is a desk. Somebody sits at the desk, they've got the GoPro, and they can look left and right. That's the big thing on that. It's not video you can look at. You got a parabolic screen, and then they've got a nice one where you could put your whole squad in there. You could have your offensive line. Look at your second string offensive line is now looking over the shoulder of each one of their first string teammates as they run through the drills. In fact, they can even put you in if you've got enough coin, into not just a cave now, but a dome. 360 dome. You look in every direction. There's the sky. There's the grass. There's whatever's behind you. Pretty amazing stuff. So this takes us back. This looks pretty familiar. This looks kind of a lot like that where we started out in the University of Michigan. What you're basically making a choice from here is, do you want that person to be able to act within that environment, to move within that environment? On that first video clip that showed the 360 video, and the second part of it, you might have noticed that I said, watch the tether, because it's a tethered thing. We're not dealing with the iPhone on the glasses. We're dealing with it tethered to a gaming computer, Oculus Rift. So you're choosing between the 360 video and the compelling nature of that, because it really does feel like you're there, versus the animation that you have so much more control over. So you've got the realism versus the control, realism versus control. And as you would decide, these are going to affect what technology you buy. So you need some good answers. And asking people what they like is a really bad question. Don't ask the people what they like. What you need to do is discover what they need to learn. Last thing to do, yeah, they like the video. Sure, they all like it. This is something that a fellow I know had on the market 5-7 years ago. 180, and you could move left and right, but instead of looking left and right like this with a tracker, you had to do it with a joystick or with the left and right arrows. So now you had a fidelity issue, physical versus functional fidelity. Very important concept as we look at how we're going to maximize our virtual reality experience. Physical meaning it looks real. So that 360 video obviously is very high on that one. Functional fidelity means, though, that the math is right. So, you know, if you're using this to, and you want to model Von Miller coming off the edge, whacking the quarterback, you know, you need to have the sense of timing of that. You need the functional fidelity. Do you really need to have a visual image of him? Maybe not. What you really need is that instead of the usual 3 seconds on a 7-step drop, you've got 2.5. That's what the guy's got to speed up his clock. An NFL quarterback will talk to you about their internal clock. Because they can't see these guys, and they don't want to look at those guys because they're coming after you hard. You really don't want to look at them. You learn to put them aside. But that's part of it. You know, that's part of what would repay. Maybe you've got those second or third string quarterbacks that don't get in very often, and so they're not good at being able to just put out of mind these really big guys who are both a lot bigger than you and a lot faster than you and being paid a lot of money to take your head off. Maybe that's where the physical fidelity of it might pay off. If you're a veteran quarterback, you mastered that skill of putting that out of mind long ago. You need to master your 2.5 seconds versus 3-second drop with Von Miller off the edge. So we go into other sports, and now we're looking at ones that are not products. These are research-type projects. So, you know, a fidelity issue. Does the background make a difference? Nice steady there? No, doesn't make any difference. You know, here we're in a lab where they're doing a rugby skill, a rugby throwing skill. So you've got the action part of it. Now, these are ones that are incorporating the action. This is not read-only. This is interact. This is a true interaction with that. This is one, heck, this is from like 2008. So we've got the rugby guy, and you can see he's got the reflectors on him so that they can record that, put it into the game, and he really is practicing the throw-in, which in rugby is something where it goes wrong a lot. This, on the other hand, you'd call a medium or low fidelity one. We're using something like a Kinect or whatever to judge that motion. You get the idea of the motion, it's coming in there. But obviously, that was a lot lower in physical fidelity than the one that we saw before. The real question in your mind would be, how's the functional fidelity? Does the guy's motion like this and what he's doing actually deliver the ball in the kind of timing in which they, you know, in rugby where the guy gets up on the other guy's shoulders and all like that? That'd be fun to bring to the NFL. You know, man, we wouldn't have, the extra point wouldn't be so automatic. One of the things when you had when you were looking at the sky through your goggles there, one of the things you were thinking about that your coaches thinks about is you can prepare for your next opponent, or you can review your last game. But that's not so, because they're not going to let you take and put your 360-degree camera out there in the middle of the field. But this is a European company, and they've got video pickups around the stadium, but other companies who are here are doing it with sensing on the players, and you can follow them, and you could reproduce that game. You could reproduce last week's game if you accept an animated, iconic representation versus a photorealistic one. You can actually go over and relive that with the quarterback or any other position. You could turn him around and say, look, here's what you're showing the safety. Every time you drop like that, you're showing the safety this. And he's standing there as the safety looking at himself from Saturday or Sunday's game. That's pretty good stuff. That might be worth the photorealistic. Is that a training thing, or is that an entertaining thing? You know, do we need to entertain players? We've got guys who are trying to figure out how to get rid of the ball without having their head taken off. Do we need to motivate them to do that? Or are they going to do that just to keep their head? Now, at the Consumer Electronics Show, then we get a different version. So here's the 360 VR from the same company that's doing the NFL ones, and this is a fan experience one. And very compelling from that. I've got no argument there. I think the fan experience is a great way to use this type of stuff. And in the lab, where our work is a little more black and white, here the guy is getting rid of the tether by putting the computer and the connections in a backpack. It looks like Ghostbusters, for anybody who remembers that. And he's actually trying to move to tackle this guy coming at him. Not a lot of physical or psychological fidelity, but a lot of functional fidelity. And then we kind of change to a different kind of sport. Different kind of sports action. We're not talking about patterns of play. We're talking about perceptual cognitive. Those are things like return of serve in tennis, blocking a kick in soccer, a penalty kick, or of course cricket, bowling, or pitch recognition, my area of particular study. You know, these are areas where you've got less than a half a second for the entire thing. This is a little different. That quarterback has a nice, generous 3 seconds. So this is a company that's now showing a 360. Again, you can see the cave-type environment, also at Consumer Electronics Show. Wow, pretty realistic. I felt like that was coming right in there. However, although we might be something that can simulate like this is a pitching machine. It's a video pitching machine, video image, and a ball's fired out. There's a pitching machine behind there. So you can see those are kind of digital and analog versions of the same thing. But the science of this really is that to be able to hit a major league splitter, which this guy's throwing out, you need to recognize it in the first 10 to 20 feet out of the hand. 1/3 ball flight. That's where your decision has to be made. So, can we just work on that? And I have a poster out in the hall where I talk about my experience using this video occlusion method. So that you're giving a point of view and you're cutting off the video, and the trainee or the subject in a research mode has to guess what the pitch is. You know, so this is what it looks like in a training mode. Okay, you got to guess what it is. Fastball, strike. No. Okay, let's see the replay. Nope. That shows this is going to be a curveball. Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. You know, next. And so we're getting a lot of repetition with instant feedback and variety. You know, now the replay on this one, you'll notice, is kind of funky unless you believe in left-handed umpires. But we flip the video, so you can see the guy left-handed or right-handed. So now you got to call the pitch. Somebody call it. Curve, okay? Curve, ball or strike? Yeah. If the honest people are going to call ball, because that one came popping up. That's what you need to retrain your eyes to see. Wade Boggs used to say he could feel his eyes bob in his head. That's how he knew it was the hanging curve. He was giving himself a mental cue that would overcome what his eyes were telling him, knowing his eyes were lying to him. So that, you know, we can talk about neurological, but when we talk about neurological remapping, we really get back to drill and practice, the greatest training technique of all time. Maybe you get a chance to hit these. I don't think there's anything you can do that can get you ready to hit that. Who knows who that pitcher was? Doc Gooden, okay. Yeah, that goes back a little ways. Who was the batter? I think it was Davy Lopes. But, you know, this is the point, that we've got these different things to consider. And these are all right of wow. You really want to think about, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to do with this? Do you need that realism? Do you need a focus right here? Is this a practice sort of thing? You know, really breaking down and considering such things as whether you're using it for general training of quarterbacks, if you're a quarterback guru, or preparing for the next opponent, whether you need to have the action or if what you're trying to learn is the decision and you can divorce it from the action, which makes it much more efficient. Headset versus cave, 360 video versus 3D animation, which right now is these are products that go this way. They have vastly different price tags. So your GM decision based on there. And the fidelity issues. And those are really important because assumptions are made that more realistic equals more better learning. That is an entirely unproven and very expensive assumption. In fact, the research done in that area, and our job is to do better research in that area, answer some of these questions for you curious GMs in the audience. You know, think about what type of skill you're trying to train. How do we work on that? Let's work right of wow and make good decisions about how we use what promises to be a really spectacular, potentially game-changing technology for sports coaching. that concludes that. So I guess we have questions or observations. I'm perfectly fine with either one of those. Yeah. The research on that is that it's not very important. I think that it's important because you're trying to pick up cues like a skinny wrist or something like that. It's got to be good enough to pick those up. I worry that when they turn it into VR, you lose some of those cues. You know, you lose the cue, maybe it's the leg lift. There are certain things in there. A lot of times that expert can't tell you exactly what it is that they're reading, but we've got some of these occluded clips are cut off right out of hand, and we get guys who are guessing 70, 75% when chance is 33%. They'll still tell you they're guessing. But it doesn't need to be like, I don't think that it needs to be 3D, because we don't have stereoscopic vision at 20 yards. When you start getting in close, like the one where you had the hockey goalie, well, now that's where you get the payoff, because you really do kind of need to know what's going around behind you. You know, and it's all in here and close. That's, I think, where you get the payoff. At 20 yards out here, no. You need to see the cues you need to see. Of the pitches you looked at, the first two pictures were kind of low fidelity. The last one was higher for visual fidelity. But guys get it off of any of them. Yeah.
How important is it if you're doing interactive training to do some type of modeling with on-body sensors to be able to look at performance being used in specific situations?
Yes, exactly. If you remember back to the video clip that we showed of the exosystem, the question was on using reflectors and that sort of thing to capture that motion and put it in there. And actually that Exos company had one beyond what we looked at, where they had a whole big room and they captured all of that. And then ultimately it was of more value to the strength and conditioning people than it was as a skills trainer. And you know, they continue to use a lot of that. We had some interesting things with, you know, smaller apps and, you know, trying to get at those things in the environment. That starts to go off into a different kind of domain. Does it need to be realistic for that? You need the functional fidelity. What you really need there, right, is that kind of, you need to have it captured and you need to know exactly what those stresses are and those things, and probably care less about what it looks like, you know, how realistic it looks, I would think. Good. Yeah. Her.
So we're talking visual with the, all the stuff that you showed today and the functional as well. What about other senses, audio? Are any of the products including that stuff in there as well?
So the question is about audio and other senses. This is really good. The people who did the 360 video were really savvy because they recorded stereo audio and you put stereo headset on. Now, that could have been done at any time. We could set up a camera at any time next to a quarterback and record it in this way and have done that. We just didn't think of it before. Sometimes that's the way with technology. You get something that really comes in and kind of changes things, and then you start looking for, wow, we could backfill our old methods with this. But that makes a huge difference, the sound, because if those big uglies are coming after you, you can hear the sweat. I mean, that is definitely part of fooling your senses that you were actually there. Part of it is if they start moving, though, that's when you have to have the garbage can nearby. If the video wasn't moving and now you start moving when it wasn't there, or even worse, if the video moves, like for football, if you were trying to depict a quarterback's zone read, where he's got to run and then read the end and then pitch, if you're watching the VR glasses and all of a sudden it starts moving this way, great, good. Yeah, other questions? Yeah.
Are you aware of any research kind of comparing VR training with actual practice? You know, if I'm a GM, I'm wondering, you know, the guy's time is so busy, why am I going to invest their time if actual practice is better?
This is a great question. One of the video coordinators I talked about posed this same issue. That is, are you actually going to give up practice time? Because practice time, even in the NFL with the player contract, is just as limited as it is in NCAA, where you've got 20 hours of contact time. Are you going to give your contact time over to picking up some video for some later use? Or, for your playbook, your VR playbook or whatever. So that's so critical in there. That's part of that fitting in piece. So in fact, talking to the Ravens guy, they've declined. They've looked at a number of different systems, and they're not now. Now they're struggling a little bit and say we're going to make it work on the field. We've got that limited practice time. That's 100% focus on there. So they're making a good decision. I missed something. If the price were the same. Now, see now, well, you guys are full of the good stuff. I'm going to take some. Is asking if the price advantage were the same. If we take price out of it, how would you be thinking about it? And as my consultant to you, as the GM sitting in the audience, is to do exactly that. Take the price completely off the table. You're going to ultimately make a cost-benefit analysis. The cost is going to change. It could be different tomorrow than it is today. Exos, the big player in that, is coming out with their own version of the 360 that's going to work in their system at a fraction of the price. All of a sudden, there's going to be some competition. That's going to change things fast. That's not the point. Not the point of what we're doing here anyway. The point of what we're doing here is exactly, as the fellow says, we want to understand what are those specific benefits. So I would, as hard as it is as a GM, I would start your decision process by taking money off the table, assuming they're all exactly the same, and then say, what approach here gives our players and coaches the tools they need to get better so we can win more games? We're not needing to entertain them. From yes and no. Yes, there's a value to the realism. When we show these pitches here, it's something that sometimes people kind of almost struggle with. They say, that's it? That's all there is to it? And say, yeah, we're going to test in the research part of that and train pitch recognition by having you recognize pitches. There are other systems out there that have game-based and an animation coming at you, and you press the space bar to, So what I value in any simulation, you've got three aspects of fidelity that you're interested in. You're interested in display, which is mostly what we're talking about. You're interested in input. What's the fidelity of the input? I showed you the one where the guy had the 180 view, but you're doing it with the arrow keys. It didn't strike people, And the other one is feedback. Display, input, feedback. So what I'm going to put my money in is display. I want to have a realistic display. Doesn't need to be 3D, needs to be real pictures. On animations of pictures, no matter how good you think your algorithms are, when they go to VR, when you see the rugby ones, and that's where they've really done some nice research with this throw-in drill and everything, they ultimately end up guessing. And this is not a guessing thing. So I say put your realism right there. As far as the action, matching it with the action of hitting, this is very controversial in my area in sports sciences because there's people who believe in direct perception, and they would say, without the action, there is no learning. I'm saying if you can accept decoupling the perception-action link, then you can really woodshed the perception part of it. We could get hundreds of pitches in the time that you could get 10 in the batting cage. That it's where are you going to put your? I'm going to put my shekels in the display. I don't feel like you need the whole thing, but that's my theory, and there are others who completely disagree, and they're saying it really has to be tied to that action in order for it to sink into the mind and learning. A more important way of thinking about that is probably not right or wrong, but where in the learning trajectory is that person? If the person's learning to hit, then you need this whole thing. If they know how to hit, they're a major leaguer or a college player, they know how to hit. What they need to know is what's coming so they can either adjust or take the pitch. So where they are in the learning trajectory, none of these are good or worse. Not any of these decisions are that. All of these things have ways that they work. It's that fit. It's that puzzle we looked at. Yeah.
I would think if you're a lousy quarterback, using this tool would not make you a better quarterback. Okay. So the question is, if the good quarterbacks have certain best practices to best utilize these tools, what is it?
Well, I described the Carson Palmer one. What he wanted to do was, he didn't really want it. People think that they're getting this to read defenses, practice reading defenses. Well, in Carson Palmer's case, he's been an NFL quarterback for 13 years, something like it. He can read defenses. What he was really concerned with were the fine points of his technique. So he could self-coach by almost literally standing next to himself and doing that. Now, that also could become pretty good to that second or third stringer. That can be helpful for him. But if that's really what your concern is, now you're getting to the one where you're saying, no, we really want to be able to track this. Maybe it's the one where you actually throw a football and it hits something. Or maybe it's, remember that throw-in one where maybe you just pantomime it. Maybe we're not interested in the mechanics of actually throwing the ball. Maybe that's not where our quarterback who sucks is bad. He's like a lot of college quarterbacks come out and they've got to see the guy open. It's very hard for them to learn to throw into space and there's not a receiver there. So there maybe we go to the thing where you have to pantomime it. You know, you've got to do that. It's going to come into the game. The timing is there. Now we've got something matched, and that was a medium fidelity. Now we've got something matched to that type of learning trajectory and skill set that you're trying to work on. That's the thinking we want. Yeah?
Are you aware of anybody capturing brainwave data while they're doing VR?
Yes. There's a company that's got actually they presented here. They had a big presence at MIT Sloan a couple of years ago, a couple of Columbia guys, and they're really working with EEG, measuring the brain waves, and it's like they feel like they can spot the spike of, spike of arousal there. Now, what's really interesting to me is, okay, the spike of arousal is not a big deal. You're going to get that. What I'm interested in is the spike of inhibition. Is there a marker for the inhibition where that skilled batter is somehow to say, yes, no? Or, you can make the swing here, and my colleagues in Australia who study this with a technique where you're using the video and together, you've got a space like right in here, right before those hips open, where you can sink a little bit more, you can reach that slider, and so you see somebody like a Josh Donaldson with that ballistic swing that he's doing. If he's not picking the ball in the first 10 feet, he's a 200 hitter. And he wasn't born as the Josh Donaldson he is. So you know that his progression through there was mastering this coming out of it, because there's a lot of action in here. There's a lot of action in that load. He's got to be picking that early. You know it. Yeah.
What do you think the implications of augmented reality are going to be, where rather than having your second string quarterback come into a scene, now the scene evolves around him and he can throw to sort of the oneers who are going to be on the field?
Sure, we didn't even get there. This, by the way, is the year of VR and AR. Did you guys know that? The year of VR and AR. I got to talk it's kind of similar type of subject next week at South by Southwest. So you're really hip if you got there, The augmented reality, like we saw the one where it was kind of from our quiz, where it showed like what the position. So here is the tailback, here is the tight end, and all. So you could certainly see where a guy's in that learning mode, to where he's looking at the field, he's taking his 7-on-7 snap, and some of those things are labeled for him, as he needs to work on some of those things. He throws the ball, and at the same time that you see the trajectory of his actual throw, you see somehow calculated. You've got algorithms that, my son does video with a Southeast Conference team, and they had a guy who came in, he'd been a really successful college quarterback, and they figured out the problem was that he threw everything on the same trajectory. I think you guys read that after a while, So some kind of virtual reality where he's throwing the ball on the field, and at the same time, you've got GPS, whatever you're doing, so it's showing an ideal arc for that type of pass. If that's the type you're thinking about, yeah. Really cool. Yeah, a lot of potential there.
Yeah, with the face recognition experiment, is there an inflection point where after 10 minutes, people start to tune down because they've been watching it for so long?
No, but my area really is instructional design. So when we do drill and practice, just like with kids learning math facts, 10 minutes is about the limit. What we'd really like to do is you've got the iPad, you're flying from Seattle to Tampa, and guys pass it around, you take your 10 minutes, you take your 10 minutes, you take your 10 minutes. At the end of the day, the coach looks and says, what's your name? Alan? Alex. Say, you know what? We don't usually bat Alex against right-handers, but he killed on this thing. See, so when coaches start tracking on it, you guys are just using it for practice. He absolutely sees this guy. You know, he sees Chris Archer. I don't know why or how, but he sees him like nobody else on the team. Now, that almost starts to get to the area which, and certainly in the analytics here for baseball, that would be the last frontier. You're messing with the batting order. Yeah.
Have there been any research or studies done that study VR's effects on maybe player confidence or sort of the psychology associated with that, reinforcing the positive?
The question about research on the psychological values of VR, unfortunately, there's not. You guys are going to ask a lot better questions than I have answers for because we really need to drive a research agenda that focuses on these things. Again, it's kind of where that person in their development. If you've got a guy who is struggling a little bit in the confidence department, we'd really want to put him into that. Make him really feel like he's mastered it, not in an animated one, but that would probably pay off for that because of the emotional. There's so much more emotional part of it. So if you feel like the emotion connects with the confidence and what you're trying to put in there, then that probably is a payoff for you. So we don't just assume that more realistic is better, but here's a case where we're saying this guy needs it. Yeah, was there anything? Oh, okay.
Okay, so I come from the field of sports psychology. So as you're doing the presentation, I'm fascinated by it because when we work with athletes, we try to work on imagery and from the internal perspective as well as externally. So as if they're watching themselves on television, as well as if they're watching themselves like through their eyes. Usually trying to get athletes to see themselves do that activity like through visualization through like that first person perspective is the hardest. So absolutely, I could see how this application would work. Moreover, we know that through visualization, an athlete could do, so this speaks to like the GM question, an athlete could do that same activity, and I think you said it earlier, like they could do it like 100 times versus like 10 times in practice. So when you're cutting back or cutting down on the overuse training that would occur. But we also know through visualization that athletes are having the same motor firing sequence at that muscle like that after doing that activity. So I'm curious in terms of how you could apply like a measure of self-confidence as someone's doing that and tracking them over a season to see like how does their performance on the field change when they're doing this and how does their confidence, their state confidence while they're doing that activity, has that changed?
Yeah, so the question kind of, for the sake of the video, everybody here can hear fine, is about a lot about visualization, which is such an important psychological skill, and we know that the people, as they become veterans at that, you know, they can do their own VR. You know, Carson Palmer can just sit back. That's one of the reasons he doesn't look at that thing. He's got it all in here. He's got thousands of NFL. And so, but how do we see that? We can't see his visualization. So some of these tools can. The coaches like to stand there and watch the screen and see where the guy's looking and that sort of thing, and be in his ear as he's doing it. And one of the things that they're talking about now is putting eye tracking on it. So you could actually be in the guy's ear and say, no, you came off of your first read too fast. Let's replay that again, linger there. And I would think that the sports psychologist then could bring in a tool like that and say, let's teach you how to visualize. Because we assume we can tell people, well, visualize. Well, that's again, like we were talking about before, that's a high-level perceptual cognitive skill, right? I mean, to visualize that. And we don't know how to do it. I talked to Ken Revisa, well-known baseball sports psychologist, and I asked him that same question. I said, how do we know if a guy's visualizing? And he said, we really don't have a lot of ways, although the EEG would be an interesting one to bring into that. But he said what he does is he watches their eyeballs. That if they're visualizing properly, he feels like he can see their eyeballs moving inside their head, which I thought that was pretty cool. So yeah, I think that I'm really excited about marrying some of these things together with sports psychology. Now, the thing is that academically, this aspect of sports science, this perceptual cognitive decision science, is under sports psychology in the journals and in the conferences and not in the field. My sense is that the shingle out sports psychologists either don't care or don't want to, feel like this would go over too far into the coaching area. But I think the perceptual cognitive, the whole perceptual cognitive part of that actually has a better chance coming in through the strength and conditioning people. But I would love to have you be the one to prove that wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, I worked with Jason Day on the PGA Tour, and I can tell you that exactly what he does when he visualizes. You can see that on camera, his eyes flutter.
Yeah, it's nice to have a tell.
You just briefly mentioned about eye tracking. Is there any research that's been done to show that the gaze or where people are looking on a VR is the same as where they're looking on a field in real life? Is it traceable?
And there's my next steady. I'm literally going down to extended spring training with a team, and I'm trying to find somebody. If you know anybody who's really good with eye tracking, I'll get my card and give them the information, because I go down there. I want to work my occlusion with this, and actually their minor league hitting coordinator is so hip to this stuff that's what he invited it in to do. See how those things would pair up together, and can we trace that looking at the video? And now can we go out and trace it in the bullpen? Okay, that's a real live thing. If we try and do real live football, it's all over the place, or basketball, or anything else. But baseball is very constrained. So we might be able to take that tracking and go out. And at the point where we can say, okay, first of all, we've got alignment between watching a video of a pitcher and watching the pitcher in the bullpen. Okay, that helps us a lot. Now we can use the cheaper, easier one with that. If we find that the same people who are better at the occlusion, that they can guess those pitches when that they've got, typically experts have fewer, longer fixations. Let's see if that theory holds up. The coaches talk about looking at their insignia, hard and soft focus over to the release point. Do the ones who are good really do that? Johnny Bench talks about, heck, he'd look down here. He says, if the pitcher's throwing you the ball back here, pick it up. But he's a catcher, so would it be different from other people? So questions like this that are driven by the science, but really savvy to the actual sport itself is where we need to be. We need to have an agenda to do that kind of research, to answer your question. Yeah.
Is there any important areas still in computer vision with virtual reality that do better analysis or understand as you were talking about any ideal path or things that are happening in augmented reality?
Okay, repeat that. I didn't quite get it.
The intersection of computer vision, so algorithmically detecting what is coming in from the live video feed that's high fidelity and interpreting that into a signal that you can then analyze.
Computer vision?
So if a video feed is coming in,
Mhm.
a computer can read each pixel, for example, the color, like
Oh,
what should
sure. So what you're talking about now, which is kind of like reading the video in there and seeing that. We're talking about pitch recognition for the hitters, but wouldn't this be great for the pitchers? So they go, because they talk about tipping pitches, and when they talk about that, they usually say, well, the guy holds his glove sideways for a curve, or he splays the fingers for a slider. That all's in there, and guys pick it. But the real ones are these. And if you could really pixelate those things, with some of the tracking and all, or so that you could say this is what's actually different, both for training the batters, but also the pitchers. What I do when I train with this is I don't just use the computer and then say that somehow goes to the batter's box. Have them go out to the bullpen while a pitcher is working, and what they need to do is have a choice. Like they're supposed to. An easy one is yes for fastball, no for not a fastball. Basic read, most basic pitch recognition read. Guys stand there and they've got to say yes or no before the ball hits the catcher's mitt. You got a half second to do that. You've got to get your recognition right up here in order to get it in there. And so they're out there doing that. But what you hear the coaches going around and saying is louder and earlier, because the pitching coach realizes that's great feedback for his guy. If every time he comes up here, no, they're calling that not a fastball, and he's right here, that's a pretty good teaching point. You say, son, something about what you're doing is letting these guys know that's a change of speed, or that's something coming off of that. We got to change that. Yeah, great. Anything else? Yeah, appreciate the dialogue and that, especially with the free lunch waiting in the hall.